Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the massive space station grow larger on the screen. The station spun slowly like a giant wheel made of metal and glass. It was home to aliens from hundreds of different worlds, all working together in something called the Galactic Council. His hands were sweaty inside his clean uniform. 5 years ago, humans had made first contact with alien life. Now they were trying to prove they belonged among the stars. It was not easy. Earth was what the aliens called a Class 12 death world. Most alien races would die on Earth within hours, without special equipment to keep them alive. But humans were different. They had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. Poisonous animals, deadly weather, diseases, natural disasters, and 1,000 other dangers had made humans tough. What would kill most aliens was just another Tuesday for a human. Amy Chen looked up from her communication station. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and serious eyes. "Captain, we have an incoming message from the Council." "Put it on screen," Jake said. He straightened his shoulders and tried to look professional. The hologram that appeared showed a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Its name was Counselor Vexithera, and it spoke with a voice like music. "Captain Morrison, the Council welcomes humanity's continued help with the Outer Rim mining operations. Your species' unique abilities have proven most valuable in extracting resources from hostile environments." Jake smiled politely, though something about the alien's tone made him uncomfortable. "We're happy to help, Counselor. Humanity believes in working together for everyone's benefit." The alien's large black eyes seemed to study Jake for a moment. "Indeed. Your people's willingness to work in conditions that would kill others is remarkable. We have new assignments for several human teams. Dangerous work, but well within your capabilities." After the transmission ended, Jake stared at the blank screen. Something felt wrong, but he could not put his finger on what it was. Humanity was desperate to prove itself to the galaxy. They wanted to show they were more than just tough survivors from a deadly world. They wanted to be respected members of galactic civilization. Across the galaxy, other human crews were having similar conversations. Commander Lisa Hayes was on a toxic world called Sulfron 7, negotiating mineral rights. The air on Sulfron 7 would burn the lungs of most aliens in seconds. Lisa and her team worked there in simple protective gear while alien supervisors watched from sealed habitats, safe from the poisonous atmosphere. "The pay is getting worse," Lisa told her second-in-command, Lieutenant Carl Roberts, as they walked between the mining sites. "They're cutting our compensation again, saying our natural resistance to the toxins makes the work easier for us." Carl wiped sweat from his forehead. Even with their natural toughness, working on Sulfron 7 was exhausting. Easy for them to say. They're sitting in their air-conditioned boxes while we're out here breathing this stuff. Meanwhile, Dr. Ben Parker was leading a research team on Oceanus 9, a water world with crushing pressure and freezing temperatures. The pressure at the depths they worked would flatten most aliens instantly. Ben's team used basic diving equipment, while alien researchers studied their findings from the safety of orbiting ships. "We're getting remarkable data," Ben reported to his surface team, "but I notice they're keeping all the important research for themselves. We do the dangerous work. They get the credit." Back on the Council station, Jake met with other human captains in a small conference room. The room was sterile and cold, designed for alien comfort rather than human needs. Captain Nicole Brooks had just returned from a peacekeeping mission on a jungle world called Venomheart. Her uniform was stained with mud and sweat. "It's not peacekeeping," Nicole said, her voice tired. "We're being used to suppress rebellions. The locals are fighting for their independence, and we're the ones enforcing council rule because we're the only ones who can survive in their environment." Sergeant Dan Mitchell, one of Nicole's team leaders, nodded grimly. "The natives aren't evil. They just want the right to govern themselves, but the council wants their resources, so we're the ones doing the dirty work." Jake listened to his fellow officers and felt his unease growing. When humanity had first joined the galactic community, they had been told they would be partners, equal members of a vast civilization spanning the stars. But more and more, it felt like they were just being used. The proof came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rachel Foster was working on a research station near a dangerous radiation zone called Gamma 7. While analyzing data transmissions, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Hidden in the Council's internal communications were references to humanity that were chilling. Humans were not listed as citizens or even allies. They were classified as useful biologics, living tools to be deployed wherever the Council needed work done in dangerous conditions. The communications revealed plans that were even worse. The Council was discussing breeding programs to ensure a steady supply of human workers. They talked about expanding human settlements not to give humanity more worlds to live on, but to create more humans for dangerous jobs. Rachel's hand shook as she read the final document. It was a proposal to restrict human space travel and implement safety measures that were really control mechanisms. Humanity was being turned into a slave race, and they were doing it with smiles and talk of partnership. She encrypted her findings and sent them back to Earth with a simple message. They've crossed the line. It's time to show them what Deathworlders are really capable of. On Earth, Admiral Grace Parker received Rachel's message in her office overlooking the city of New Geneva. She had been watching Council inspection ships land on Earth with increasing frequency. The aliens claimed these were routine safety checks, but Grace knew better. They were studying human military capabilities in population centers. Her aide, Captain Steve Martinez, entered with a worried expression. "Ma'am, the Council is implementing new safety protocols for all human ships. Every vessel must be fitted with remote shutdown devices." Grace's jaw tightened. Remote shutdown devices meant the Council could disable any human ship whenever they wanted. Combined with travel restrictions and mandatory Council observers on human vessels, the picture was becoming clear. Humanity had tried to play by the galaxy's rules. They had worked hard to prove they could be trusted members of galactic civilization. They had taken every dangerous job, accepted every unfair contract, and smiled while doing it. But the galaxy had seen their kindness as weakness. Their willingness to help had been mistaken for submission. Their desire to belong had been used to trap them. Grace looked out at the city below, where millions of humans lived their lives unaware that their species was being enslaved. She thought about Jake and his crew, about Lisa on her toxic world, about Ben in the crushing depths, about Nicole fighting wars she never wanted to fight. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had pushed the Deathworlders too far. It was time to remind the universe why Earth was classified as a death world in the first place. Commander Roy Turner sat in his small room on the mining platform above Hellforge 3 and stared at the latest message from the Galactic Council. The planet below was a nightmare of molten rock and acid storms. The temperature outside reached 800 degrees, hot enough to melt most metals. For humans, it was just very uncomfortable work that required protective suits and lots of water breaks. He called his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kate Sullivan, to his quarters. She entered looking tired and frustrated. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her uniform was stained with sweat despite the climate control in their habitat. "Look at this," Roy said, handing her the data pad. "They want us to stay 8 more months and they're cutting our pay by 20%. Kate read the message and her face grew angry. "That's the 3rd pay cut this year. And look at this part. Here. They're calling our hazard pay luxury compensation for species-specific advantages. They're saying we don't deserve extra money because the work is easier for us." Roy laughed bitterly. "Easier? Tell that to Johnson. He spent 3 days in the medical bay last week because of heat exhaustion. Tell that to Williams, who's been coughing up blood from breathing the fumes." Across the galaxy, Dr. Alex Coleman was having his own problems. His research team was studying the area around a black hole called Maelstrom 1. The gravitational forces would tear apart any other species in seconds, but humans could work there with heavy protective equipment. They had just received orders that their voluntary 6-month mission was now permanent. "Permanent?" asked his research partner, Dr. Linda Hayes. "They can't just change our contracts like that." Alex looked at the official notice again. "They can, and they did. It says here that since we're uniquely qualified for this environment, we have a duty to galactic science to remain at our posts indefinitely." Linda threw her coffee cup across the small research station. It hit the wall and shattered. Duty to galactic science? What about our duty to our families? I haven't seen my kids in 8 months. On the jungle world of Venomheart, Captain Nicole Brooks was leading her human soldiers through another day of what the Council called peacekeeping. The air was thick with poison that would kill most aliens in minutes. Deadly plants grew everywhere, and the native animals were designed by evolution to kill anything that moved. Her team was supposed to be keeping the peace between the Council and the native Floraxians, but Nicole was starting to realize they were not peacekeepers. They were enforcers helping the Council steal the planet's resources. "Captain," called Sergeant Dan Mitchell from his position near a Floraxian village. "The locals are trying to tell us something. I think they're saying the Council mining operation is poisoning their water supply." Nicole walked over to where Dan was kneeling next to a Floraxian child. The alien looked like a walking flower with intelligent eyes. It was pointing toward you, the mining site, and making distressed sounds. "The kid's sick," Dan said quietly. "Look at the way its leaves are turning brown, and that's not the only one. Half the village looks like they're dying." Nicole felt sick to her stomach. The Council had told them the Floraxians were dangerous rebels who needed to be controlled. But looking at this dying child, Nicole realized the real criminals were the ones giving her orders. Back in the Sol system, things were getting worse for humanity every day. Admiral Grace Parker stood in her office watching another Council inspection ship land on Earth. These inspections had started as monthly visits but now happened every week. Her aide, Captain Steve Martinez, entered with more bad news. "Admiral, the Council has announced new safety protocols. All human ships must be fitted with remote shutdown devices. They say it's to prevent accidents in dangerous environments." Grace turned from the window. "Remote shutdown devices? You mean they want to be able to turn off our ships whenever they feel like it?" "That's exactly what it means," Steve replied. "And there's more. They're also requiring Council observers on all human vessels leaving the solar system. They call them safety monitors." Grace walked to her desk and picked up a report about human colonies outside Earth. The Council was implementing strict population controls, limiting how many children human families could have. They claimed it was to prevent overcrowding, but Grace could see the real reason. They wanted to control how many humans existed. The worst news came from Dr. Rachel Foster on Gamma 7. While working on the radiation-soaked planet, she had been monitoring Council communications as part of her research. What she found made her want to throw up. She called her team together in their shielded habitat. The 5 humans working with her gathered around the table, their faces showing the strain of working in such a hostile environment. "I've been analyzing the Council's internal communications," Rachel said, her voice shaking with anger. "What? I found changes everything we thought we knew about our relationship with the galaxy." She activated a holographic display showing decoded messages between Council members. "They don't see us as citizens or allies. Look at this classification code, UB7, Useful Biologics Category 7. We're not people to them. We're living tools." The room fell silent as the team read through the messages. There were discussions about breeding programs to produce more humans for dangerous work, plans to restrict human technology development to keep them dependent on the Council, proposals to relocate entire human populations to serve as workers on hostile worlds. Dr. Maria Santos, the team's biologist, stood up so fast her chair fell over. "They're talking about us like we're livestock, like we're animals they can breed and move around as they please." Rachel nodded grimly. "It gets worse. They've already drawn up plans for what they call human work zones, essentially slave camps on dangerous worlds where humans would be forced to work until they die." The team sat in stunned silence. Everything they had believed about humanity's place in the galaxy had been a lie. The Council had never intended to treat humans as equals. From the beginning, they had seen humanity as a resource to be exploited. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Parker was receiving similar intelligence from other sources. Human intelligence officers working within Council facilities had started reporting disturbing conversations they had overheard. Council members spoke about humans the way previous civilizations had spoken about work animals. Captain Martinez brought her the final piece of evidence. It was a recording from a Council meeting where they discussed the human problem. The aliens were concerned that humans might eventually realize they were being exploited and rebel. "The solution is simple," one council member said in the recording. "We increase their dependence on us while limiting their ability to resist. Control their food supply, their technology, their movement between worlds. Make them grateful for the scraps we give them." Grace listened to the recording 3 times before she could speak. When she finally did, her voice was cold with rage. "They've made their choice. They decided to treat us like slaves instead of partners." She activated the emergency communication system that connected her to every human military commander in the galaxy. The message she sent was short and clear. "Condition read. The partnership is over. Prepare for new orders." Across human space, commanders and captains received Grace's message and began to understand what it meant. Humanity had tried to be good citizens of the galaxy. They had worked dangerous jobs, accepted unfair contracts, and died in hostile environments to prove they belonged among the stars. But the galaxy had seen their willingness to help as weakness. Their desire to belong had been used to trap them. Their natural toughness had been exploited to turn them into expendable workers. The Council had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that because humans were willing to work in dangerous conditions, they were naturally submissive. They had confused humanity's desire for acceptance with an inability to fight back. They were about to learn the difference between a species that chose to be peaceful and a species that was actually harmless. Earth was called a death world for good reasons, and those reasons had nothing to do with the environment. The Deathworlders were done playing nice. The response came quietly at first. There were no big announcements or dramatic speeches. Instead, something much more dangerous began to happen across the galaxy. Humans started saying no. Commander Roy Turner received the Council's latest demands. While eating breakfast in the mining station cafeteria, they wanted a 50% increase in production with no extra pay. They also wanted to transfer 20 of his best workers to an even worse planet called Nightmare 5. Roy put down his coffee and looked at his team. These people had worked beside him for 2 years in conditions that would kill most aliens in minutes. They trusted him to make the right decisions. He activated his communication system and sent a simple message back to the Council. No. The Council representative, a crystal-like alien called Shardkeeper Zix, appeared on the screen looking confused. Its body was made of living crystal that changed colors when it was upset. Right now, it was flashing red and orange. "Commander Turner, this was not a request. The Council has determined that your team's capabilities are required elsewhere." Roy leaned back in his chair and smiled. "I understand your position, Shardkeeper, but our original contract clearly states that reassignments require mutual agreement." "We do not agree." The alien's crystal body flashed brighter. "You cannot simply refuse Council orders." "Actually, we can," Roy replied calmly. "We've read our contracts very carefully. Every single word. Humans are very good at understanding legal documents when we need to be. What the Council did not know was that humans had been preparing for this moment since they first arrived in the galaxy. Every contract, every agreement, every legal document had been written by human lawyers who understood exactly what they were doing. Buried in the complex language were protections that the Council had ignored because they never expected humans to use them. Across the galaxy, other human teams were making the same discovery. Dr. Alex Coleman's research team at the Black Hole Station received orders to share all their data with Council military divisions. Alex read the order twice, then activated his communication system. "Negative," he told the Council representative. "Our scientific charter specifically prohibits sharing research for military applications. We are scientists, not weapons developers." The alien on the screen looked shocked. "Dr. Coleman, you cannot pick and choose which orders to follow." "We're not following orders," Alex replied. "We're following our contract. There's a difference." On the jungle world of Venomheart, Captain Nicole Brooks was facing a much more serious situation. The Council had ordered her peacekeeping force to attack a Floraxian village that was supposedly hiding rebels. But when Nicole investigated, she discovered the truth. The village was not hiding rebels. It was hiding sick children. The Council's mining operation had poisoned the local water supply, and the Floraxian doctors were trying to treat the dying youngsters. The so-called rebels were actually medical teams. Nicole gathered her soldiers in their base camp. These were tough men and women who had volunteered to serve as peacekeepers in one of the galaxy's most dangerous environments. They had signed up to protect innocent people, not to help corporations steal resources. Orders have changed, Nicole announced. We're switching sides. Sergeant Dan Mitchell nodded grimly. About time, Captain. I was getting tired of being the bad guys. The human peacekeeping force began helping the Floraxians instead of fighting them. They used their immunity to the planet's poisons to reach areas the Council forces could not access. More importantly, they began teaching the Floraxians how to fight back. But Nicole was not teaching them the careful, rule-following methods the Council expected. She was teaching them real human military tactics, the kind of brutal, efficient fighting techniques that had allowed humans to survive on a death world. Forget about fair fighting, she told a group of Floraxian warriors. The Council doesn't fight fair, so neither should you. Use the environment. Set traps. Attack when they don't expect it. Make them afraid to leave their safe zones. Meanwhile, Admiral Grace Parker was implementing humanity's most ambitious plan. The remote shutdown devices that the Council had forced onto human ships had been quietly modified by human engineers. Instead of allowing Council control, they now served as a secret communication network. Captain Steve Martinez brought her the final report. Every human ship in the galaxy is now connected, Admiral. We can coordinate across light years in real time, and the Council has no idea. Grace smiled for the first time in weeks. Excellent. Begin Operation Whisper. I want every human team to know they're not alone. The message that went out through the hidden network was simple but powerful. You are not slaves, you have rights, you have choices, use them. But the most important discovery was happening in Earth's research laboratories. Dr. Helen Grant had been studying the genetic profiles of various galactic species, trying to understand how they had evolved on their peaceful worlds. What she found was startling. Most alien species had literally evolved away their capacity for violence and conflict. Thousands of years of peaceful civilization had changed their brains and bodies. They had become incapable of truly understanding aggressive behavior. She called Admiral Parker with her findings. Grace, you need to hear this. The aliens aren't just choosing to be peaceful. They actually cannot understand violence the way we do. Their brains don't work that way anymore. Grace sat down heavily in her chair. What are you saying, Helen? I'm saying they've been peaceful for so long that they've lost the ability to fight effectively. Their entire civilization is built on the assumption that everyone will follow the rules because everyone always has. They literally cannot comprehend the idea of organized rebellion. This revelation changed everything. Humanity's greatest advantage was not their physical toughness or their ability to survive in hostile environments. Their greatest advantage was that they understood conflict in ways the galaxy simply could not imagine. Humans had evolved on a world where violence was a survival necessity. They understood deception, guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, and strategic thinking at levels that peaceful civilizations could not even conceive of. Dr. Grant's research showed that while aliens could build powerful weapons and large armies, they could not use them effectively against an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules of engagement. They were like chess masters trying to play against someone who kept moving the pieces in ways that were not supposed to be possible. As this information spread through humanity's secret network, a new plan began to form. They would not declare war on the Galactic Council. That would be expected, familiar, something the Council could understand and counter with their superior technology and numbers. Instead, they would do something the galaxy had never seen before. They would teach the oppressed how to fight back. Dr. Rachel Foster sent the final message from her radiation-soaked research station. Operation Wildfire is approved. Begin Phase 1 immediately. The operation was simple in concept, but revolutionary in execution. Every human team would make contact with the local species on their assigned worlds. Not the Council-approved species, but the ones the Council had dismissed as primitive, dangerous, or worthless. These species had been ignored because they came from hostile worlds or because they did not fit the Council's idea of proper civilization. But humans understood that surviving on a dangerous world required intelligence, adaptability, and strength. Commander Turner's team on Hellforge 3 made first contact with the planet's native inhabitants within 3 days. The pyroclasts were silicon-based life forms that the Council had classified as non-intelligent rock formations. It took Turner exactly one conversation to realize the Council was wrong. The pyroclasts were not only intelligent, they possessed mathematical abilities that made Council computers look primitive. They had been watching the human mining operation with great interest, recognizing in humanity another species that could thrive where others would die. When Turner explained what the Council really thought of both species, the pyroclasts' response was immediate. "We will help you teach the galaxy a lesson about underestimating dangerous world survivors." Similar contacts were being made across dozens of worlds. Each new ally brought capabilities the Council had never bothered to discover. The revolution was spreading, but it was not the kind of revolution the galaxy expected. The Deathworlders were not just fighting back. They were teaching others how to fight back too. The galaxy began to burn, but not with the fires of war. It burned with the fire of awakening. Species that had been sleeping for centuries were opening their eyes and remembering what it meant to fight for their freedom. Commander Roy Turner stood on the surface of Hellforge 3 without his environmental suit for the first time. The modifications the pyroclasts had made to his equipment allowed him to breathe the superheated air directly. Around him, the silicon-based aliens moved like living mountains, their crystal bodies reflecting the planet's molten landscape. "Your Council friends are coming," rumbled Granite Singer Kex, the pyroclast leader. Its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. 3 ships heavily armed. They expect to find frightened humans and stupid rocks." Turner smiled grimly. "Then let's not disappoint them. But let's make sure they get a surprise they'll never forget." The battle for Hellforge 3 lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Council ships arrived expecting to find a mining operation in rebellion. Instead, they found something that should have been impossible. The planet itself seemed to be fighting back. Pyroclast warriors emerged from what the Council had thought was solid rock. Their crystal bodies reflected and focused the planet's natural heat into deadly beams that cut through Council ship hulls like paper. The aliens had spent so long thinking of the pyroclasts as unintelligent rocks that they had never considered they might be master tacticians. When the Council ships tried to retreat, they found their escape routes blocked by human ships that had appeared from hiding spots in the asteroid field. Turner's people had learned pyroclast camouflage techniques, making their vessels invisible to Council sensors. "Council Fleet," Turner broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Commander Turner of the Human Liberation Force. You have 10 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate why this planet is called a death world." The Council ships surrendered without firing another shot. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. On the ice world of Absolute Zero, Dr. Maria Santos had made contact with the Cryosphinx, massive creatures that the Council had labeled as too aggressive for civilized contact. The truth was very different. The Cryosphinx were not aggressive. They were protective. The Council exploration probes had been threatening their nursery areas where young Cryosphinx slept for centuries while they grew. Any parent would fight to protect their children. "The Council ships came to our world and pointed weapons at our sleeping young," explained Frostwalker Zeth, a Cryosphinx elder whose body was made of living ice and metal. "We destroyed the ships to protect our children. For this, we were called Savage." Maria nodded as she walked beside the massive alien. Even with her cold weather gear, the temperature was well below what most species could survive. But humans could adapt, and the Cryosphinx respected that. "The Council makes the same mistake over and over," Maria said. "They assume that anything different from them must be primitive or dangerous. They never try to understand. When the Council sent a fleet to reclaim Absolute Zero, they found the planet defended by an impossible alliance. Human ships worked alongside Cryosphinx ice raiders, vessels made of living crystal that could appear and disappear in the ice storms that covered the planet. The Council fleet was destroyed in a battle that lasted less than an hour. The aliens had no experience fighting an enemy that could predict their movements centuries in advance, hide in plain sight, and coordinate attacks across impossible distances. But the most shocking development came from the garden world of Verdania. Captain Lisa Hayes had been investigating supply disruptions when she discovered that the Verdani, a plant-based species, had been secretly preparing for rebellion for over 300 years. "We cannot fight as you fight," explained the Verdani, collective through their communication construct, a humanoid plant creature they had grown specifically to talk with other species. "But we can grow fighters. Every world we have fed, every species we have helped, carries within them our gift." Lisa stared at the massive gardens that covered Verdania's surface. "What kind of gift?" "Seeds," the collective replied. "Not plant seeds, but seeds of rebellion. We have been teaching the galaxy's oppressed species how to resist, slowly, carefully, over centuries. The Council thinks we are just peaceful farmers. They never noticed we were also teachers." The revelation sent shockwaves through the human command structure. The Verdani had been playing a game that lasted longer than entire human civilizations. They had been patient, subtle, and completely invisible to Council oversight. When Admiral Grace Parker received Lisa's report, she realized the scope of what was happening. This was not just a human rebellion. This was a galactic revolution that had been building for centuries, waiting for the right spark to set it off. That spark came when the Council sent their largest fleet to reclaim the Sol system. They expected to find Earth defended by primitive human ships and frightened colonists. Instead, they found something that defied all their understanding of warfare. The fleet that met them in Earth's outer system was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew alongside pyroclast crystal vessels, cryosphinx ice raiders, and dozens of other ship types from species the Council had never even known possessed space travel. But the real shock came when the Council fleet tried to use their superior weapons and numbers to overwhelm the defending force. The battle that followed was not fought according to any rules the Council understood. Pyroclast ships used mathematical precision to predict Council movements before they happened. Cryosphinx vessels appeared from hyperspace at impossible angles, having planned their attacks across multiple timelines. Other species contributed abilities the Council had never imagined. The Densari, small creatures from a high-gravity world, had developed quantum communication technology that allowed the defending fleet to coordinate as if they shared a single mind. The Resonance Weavers used sound to disrupt Council ship systems from light years away. The Deep Dwellers had somehow turned space itself into a weapon. Admiral Parker watched the battle from the bridge of her flagship and marveled at what she was seeing. Each species was contributing their unique strengths to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The Council fleet, despite having superior numbers and firepower, was being systematically destroyed by tactics they could not understand or counter. "Admiral," Captain Martinez reported, "Council fleet is requesting permission to surrender." Grace looked at the tactical display showing the remains of what had once been the Council's most powerful fleet. "Accepted, but tell them this is just the beginning." As news of the victory at Earth spread across the galaxy, the revolution exploded into open warfare. But it was not the kind of war the Council expected. This was not nation against nation or fleet against fleet. This was an entire way of thinking being challenged. Species after species revealed capabilities the Council had never known existed. Worlds the Council had dismissed as worthless became centers of resistance. Aliens the Council had classified as primitive demonstrated technology that made Council science look backwards. The revolution was spreading faster than the Council could respond to it. Every time they sent a fleet to crush a rebellion, they found themselves facing new enemies with impossible abilities. But the most devastating discovery came when several Council species began to defect. The Aquilians, longtime Council allies, announced they were joining the rebellion after learning about the breeding programs planned for humans. The Etherians, despite their peaceful nature, declared that the Council had violated every principle of civilized behavior. Within 6 months, the Galactic Council controlled less than half the territory it had ruled for millennia. The galaxy was learning a lesson that humans had tried to teach them peacefully. Diversity was not something to be feared or controlled. It was something to be celebrated and protected. The Deathworlders had stopped playing nice and they were teaching the universe that the greatest strength came not from domination, but from cooperation between different forms of life. The end came not with explosions or battles, but with a simple truth. The Galactic Council had become pointless. Council Chairman Thexmore stood alone in his private chambers aboard what remained of the Council fleet. Through his window, he could see the space station that had once been the center of galactic government. It was still there, still spinning slowly in orbit around Nexus Prime. But it was no longer his. The station had been transformed. Where once sterile white corridors had enforced council standards on all visitors, now the halls were filled with environments suited to hundreds of different species. Gardens grew next to ice caves. Crystal formations shared space with water pools. The air itself changed from section to section to accommodate different breathing requirements. Sir, his aide Flux Singer Nix entered the chamber, her aquatic features showing fear and confusion. We've received the final report. 87% of all Council territories have declared independence or joined the Terran Confederation. Thexmore turned from the window. His tall, thin frame seemed to have shrunk in the past year. The elegant robes that had once symbolized his authority now hung loose on his body. 87%? Yes, sir. The remaining 13% are mostly asking for permission to negotiate their own terms for joining the Confederation. We control virtually nothing. Admiral Grace Parker stood on the observation deck of the space station, watching as representatives from over 1,000 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. She wore a simple uniform without the elaborate decorations that Council officials had favored. The Terran Confederation believed in substance over appearance. Captain Steve Martinez approached with the latest numbers. Final count, Admiral. 1,043 species have formally joined the Confederation. Another 500 are in negotiation. The old Council territories are essentially empty. Grace nodded as she watched a group of Pyro-classed ambassadors sharing mathematical equations with Cryosphinx diplomats. In one corner, Verdani representatives were literally growing new communication devices to help translate between species that had never met before. The diversity was overwhelming, but it worked. What about the species that supported the Council? Grace asked. Most of them are asking for amnesty, Steve replied. They claim they never understood the true nature of Council policies. They want to join us. The genius of humanity's approach had been understanding that they did not need to conquer the galaxy. They needed to free it. Every species that had been labeled as primitive or unsuitable by the Council turned out to have remarkable abilities that had simply been ignored. Dr. Rachel Foster, now serving as the Confederation's chief science advisor, had spent months documenting these discoveries. Her research showed that the Council had been systematically suppressing innovation and development for thousands of years. They were not evil, she explained to a gathering of Confederation leaders from dozens of worlds. They were afraid. They had achieved stability and were terrified of change. So they classified anything different as dangerous and anything new as threatening. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some Council loyalists had tried to maintain the old order through force. The hegemony, a militaristic species that had served as the Council's enforcers, attempted to retake several key systems. Their first target was the Verdani homeworld. The hegemony commanders expected an easy victory against what they saw as defenseless farmers. Instead, they found themselves facing something they could not understand. Verdani bioships that could adapt and evolve in real time met the hegemony fleet. These living vessels, guided by pyroclast mathematics and coordinated through Densari quantum communication, fought in ways that defied all military logic. When a hegemony weapon destroyed part of a bioship, the ship simply grew new components that were immune to that particular weapon. When the hegemony tried conventional battle formations, they found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who could predict their actions through mathematical analysis. The battle lasted 4 hours. The hegemony fleet surrendered not because they were outgunned, but because they realized they were fighting something beyond their comprehension. Captain Nicole Brooks, now leading the Confederation's diplomatic corps, was present when the hegemony commander formally surrendered. "We do not understand your methods," the alien commander admitted. Our weapons are more powerful, our ships are faster, our numbers are greater. Yet you defeated us completely. How? Nicole smiled. Because you were fighting as individuals while we were fighting as a team. Every species in our fleet brought something different to the battle. You brought only one way of thinking. But the real victory came when species after species approached the Confederation asking to join. They came not because they were conquered, but because they were inspired. The resonance weavers of Harmonic 9 had been dismissed by the Council as non-technological because they did not use metal or electronics. The Confederation discovered that their sonic abilities could restructure matter at the molecular level, making them master builders and healers. The deep dwellers of Abyssal Prime had been considered primitive because they lived underground. The Confederation learned that they were actually terraforming experts who could transform hostile worlds into gardens within decades. Each new member brought not just their abilities but their perspectives. The Confederation grew stronger with every addition because diversity bred innovation. A year after the revolution began, former Council Chairman Thexmore requested a meeting with Admiral Parker. He arrived not as a conqueror but as a supplicant. His remaining forces consisted of a few dozen ships and maybe 100 worlds that still recognized Council authority. They met in a simple conference room aboard the station. Thexmore looked old and tired. The weight of watching his civilization collapse had aged him beyond his years. Admiral Parker, he began, his voice lacking the musical authority it had once carried. I come to request admission to the Terran Confederation. Grace studied the alien who had once ruled hundreds of worlds. Why? Because we were wrong, Thexmore replied simply. We thought civilization meant control. We thought progress meant stability. We thought diversity meant chaos. We were wrong about everything. Grace leaned forward. The Confederation doesn't judge based on past mistakes, but we do require a commitment to our principles: diversity, cooperation, and the belief that every species has something valuable to contribute. Can you accept that? Thexmore was quiet. For a long moment. For 3,000 years my people have ruled this galaxy. We made the rules, we enforced the standards, we decided who was worthy of citizenship. It is difficult to accept that we were not qualified to make those decisions. But, Grace prompted, but the evidence is overwhelming. In 1 year, your Confederation has achieved more scientific breakthroughs, solved more conflicts, and improved more lives than the Council managed in centuries. You have proven that our way was not just wrong, it was destructive. The ceremony where Thexmore's people officially joined the Confederation was simple but meaningful. There were no elaborate speeches or grand gestures, just a quiet recognition that the galaxy had changed forever. Dr. Helen Grant, watching from the observation deck, turned to Admiral Parker. Do you think it will last? This peace we've built? Grace looked out at the bustling station where species that had never met before were working together on projects that would have been impossible under Council rule. It's not peace, Helen. It's something better. It's growth. 10 years later, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Where once there had been rigid hierarchies and stagnant development, there was constant innovation and exploration. Species that had never left their home systems were now traveling between stars, excited to meet new forms of life. Captain Jake Morrison, now an elder statesman of the Confederation, stood on the bridge of his ship watching as a new species made first contact with the galactic community. They were methane-breathing creatures from a world of liquid nitrogen, unlike anything ever encountered before. Another impossible world with impossible life, his young aide commented. Jake smiled. There's no such thing as impossible life. Just life we haven't learned to understand yet. That's what makes the galaxy so wonderful. The Deathworlders had played nice for as long as they could. When the galaxy crossed the line, they had shown their true strength. But their greatest victory was not in fighting back. It was in teaching the universe that strength came from embracing what made each species unique. In a galaxy that had forgotten how to grow, humanity had planted the seeds of infinite possibility.